A very good morning to all of you. Firstly, thank you so much for joining us today's in the PD workshop on choosing an approach to planning at your school, done by Ms. Gurpreet Kaur Hanspal. Thank you so much for joining us today. Myself, Pooja, and I'm the marketing director at Classcipe, and I'll be also the co-host for today. Of course, my co-host is Inan, who's there on the screen. You can see her. So I would love to give you a very short brief about Classcipe and a brief about the session, what you can expect from the session today. And then I'll hand it over to Ms. Gurpreet to take care of the session. So talking about Classcipe, I'm sure many of you are quite aware about us. We are a global educator committee which helps educators like you to bridge and connect to the global world of educators and resources. We also provide efficient tools and recommended resources for you where you can make your lesson plans, unit plans across grades and curriculum. Not only that, on our platform, you can also have your own channel and you can become an educator influencer by showing your content that is created by you to the global audiences that we have. So now with further ado, we will turn the time over to our speaker for today, Ms. Gurpreet Kaur Hanspal. A very warm welcome to you, Ms. Gurpreet.
Thank you so much, Pooja and Inen, and a warm welcome to all of you who are here today. It is such an honor to be part of this learning event that's been organized by Classcipe.
Thank you so much. Yes. So
I know this is something new, but Pooja, thank you so much for giving this platform. Please continue, Pooja.
Yes, so I would love to introduce you a bit to all the attendees who we have here. So Ms. Gurpreet Kaur Hanspal, she is currently the MYP coordinator at GMIS Jakarta, and she's also the chair of the MYP schools in Indonesia. She's also very actively involved in IB regional events.
For me, the IB is not only about learning.
Sorry?
Guys, can I ask you to mute yourself and only unmute you when you want to ask questions, okay?
Yes, thank you, Inan. So quickly to let you know what you can expect from today's session. So I'm sure with this Power Pack session done by Ms. Gurpreet, you will certainly gain an insight in concept-based planners and the way the conceptual framework can be used in creating planners. And the main takeaway would be the understanding of the connection between the planning part of the planners to the student engagement through action and the way students can be guided to make conceptual connections. Also, one last point while the session is on, as mentioned by my colleague Inan, in case if you have any questions for our esteemed speaker, please share them in the chat box that you can see here, and we will try our level best to answer those. Thank you so much once again for joining us today for this PD workshop. Over to you, Ms. Gurpreet.
Sorry, Ms. Gurpreet, I need to add a few more points before you start.
Sorry.
So since Classcipe is a new platform for our attendees, so this is how you can use it to interact with Ms. Gurpreet on her interactive slides. So Gurpreet is sharing us the screen of a projector. She will control the projector from her dashboard. And as a student, when you enter workshop from Classcipe platform, you will be entered into your student page. When you will also see Gurpreet's slides, and when we are on the interactive slides, you will be able to see the place where you can type your answers or make different kinds of comments. So for participants who did not join this Zoom meeting, join this workshop via the Classcipe website, enter workshop entry, please raise your hand here. I'm going to share the students link to you here again, and to ensure you have joined the Classcipe classroom and successfully. Okay, I will share the students link here. Ms. Gurpreet, please start. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Inen. And I do understand that this is a platform that you are just starting to use. So if there's any question in the first part, feel free to just ask. Inen is there, Pooja's there, and I'm sure that they will be able to see us through. Remember, it's a learning phase that we are all in, and that's exactly what I want to bring to the forum here. When we talk about curriculum planning and creating a conceptual approach to creating a curriculum, the first thing that happens in schools is that they are asking teachers to create unit plans. So this session is going to bridge the gap between what it means to create a unit plan, which is conceptual, and then how do you approach the teaching learning bit from the conceptual point of view. Many times from different curricula, what happens is that teachers are not able to understand what the bridge should be and how should they make this bridge for their students to work on. So we will divide this session into two parts. The first part is to understand the theoretical approach to curriculum planning, which is conceptual. We will touch upon the bits of research that has been used to create planners all over the world. We are not going to focus just on IB planners, but we're going to understand the philosophy behind planners which are based on this. If you would want to ask specific questions about IB-based planners or UBD planners, we can do that also. You can write in the Zoom chat for us. We can follow that up. The second part of this session will focus on trying and refining our understanding as a group, seeing how we take things forward and moving on to the learning engagements that we can do. So I don't believe in killing people by PowerPoints. So my PowerPoints tend to be power-packed. Each of the slides that is there, as Inan said, they would be available for the viewers to see even later on. So if you would like to share this with your school or your teachers at your school, feel free. Classcipe has a lot of other workshops that are available that you can actually join in for free there too. So we in this PD global event are trying to create a kind of a link which starts with, last week was Curtis who presented about the bigger picture of curriculum and how curriculum is planned. I am this week presenting on a smaller picture, which is just the conceptual approach for unit planning. The following weeks, you will still have other presenters presenting in these series. So do let us know. I'm sure Inan and Pooja would like to see what you would like to hear from presenters, and that'll be a good feedback. So moving on to what we are going to be doing today, let's try and see who we are as a group and what is it that we bring to the table. Learning is a collaborative process, and curriculum planning means that we could be from different parts of the world. So I invite you now to put in the comments section for us that what are the present systems of curriculum planning that are used at your institute. To add the comments, you can see right at the bottom, click somewhere on this slide and you'll be able to then see a yellow dot, add your comment. And am I right in the instruction, or would you like to modify that instruction for adding comments?
Yes. Yes, this is a comment slide. You can make dots. Click, use the cursor to click on a certain part of the PPT you want to make a dot on. And then a yellow dot or whatever color you choose will appear. Then you will be able to send your comment response to the to Gurpreet. Yeah.
So looking at the comments which are there on Zoom, it appears that majority of the educators with us today are following the IB planners, and they're already using learning management systems. So even if you're kind of already in the process of using a learning management system, we'll try and start from the very basics of what exactly a concept-based planner is doing. Because when we look at the IB, there's a whole lot that is given to us in the principles into practice document, but the actual research that had gone behind the creation of the IB document is sometimes left out by educators. So in this session, when I understand that you're using the IB system and you're using the concept-based planning from the IB system, it really helps me arrange what the flow of conversation would be. If there's anybody else who uses any other curriculum system, please do let us know. That would really help me to understand your context as well as take the conversation in that direction. So what I could understand was that majority of you were either using the middle school or the MYP planning process, and they were IB teachers, and you were also PYP teachers who were there. Are there any other curriculum that you're using? Is there anybody who is associated with, let's say, an ESL school or a school that is a bilingual school?
Gurpreet, this section, this PPT, you have added the comment function. So I can type a comment here as a student.
Okay.
Hello.
Are others able to type?
Yes, I think as you will be able to see my answer in your dashboard.
If I go back here, I'm being smart, right?
Yes, yes. So this is a projector, but anyway, if students here you do not mind sharing students your dashboard information, you can always share your screen on your dashboard, and all the teachers' management is transparent to students.
Yep.
But usually, so I know this is a new platform. You can open the projector to your students on Zoom or in your classroom, because you do not want your students to see all the other people's responses and answers. And this can be used for exams as well. Yeah, that is why we created the projector. And projector is for teachers to project into their classroom or on Zoom. And the teachers can manage their individual information on dashboard and giving students feedback.
So I do have some idea now, which was there previously. Now, let's come to the main part about our learning, right? Let's look at the planners. So my question here was very simple, that what is it that you're usually writing in planners? What are the parts that you focus on when you're told that you need to create a planner, or when you start working on making planners in your school? What all are the things that you look at? So are we able to use this now? Are you able to enter text here?
No, we can't.
No, this slide, your text is not added. Yeah.
Okay. That's strange. Okay, so how about writing in the Zoom chat here that you are able to see in your planners which all parts, what are the major things that you focus on? So you're looking at topics, activities and resources, skills that are being developed, right? The context of learning, assessment, Lloyd, thank you for writing that. Yes, assessment of learning and the evidence that is there that you're looking for. The key concepts, related concepts. Okay, the theme or the line of inquiry, I think that's from the PYP era. The statement of inquiry, yes, Ronald. The learning objectives, Gayatri, correct? Yep. You need to writing the statement of inquiry here, true. The nature of the content, the learning blocks, that's an amazing point to actually look at. The learning outcomes, great. The generalizations, that's so nice, Eliana, if you're doing that. The connection between the statement of inquiry and the summative, Ronald, that's such an important point. I think so that is something that IB has brought in. The inquiry learning, the reflections, yes, Pankaj, if you're writing reflections, that is great. Here are differentiation, the student-based learning, the assessments, good. That's nice, Jyoti. I love the way that we have, Nisha, you're writing the GCs and the RCs, and you're also mentioning the KCs here, the global context, the resources, the teacher questions. Ronald, thank you so much for bringing the point that we are writing the questions as factual, conceptual, or debatable. Yeah, and you're talking about resources. That's amazing. So in all, what I'm actually seeing here is that there seems to be a lot of things that you're familiar with in the planner. And when you are looking at that, these are the points that should be there, I'm going to extend your learning a little bit. My next point of action is going to revisit some things that I know many of you would have done, but we are going to take it further and we're going to say that why exactly is this happening? And I'm going to, at this point of time, open questions with you to tell me what exactly is it that you find most difficult. Lena, you have a question? Okay, we'll come back to this. If Lena, you do have a question, you can write it in the Zoom chat here and we'll take it up from there. Anybody else, if there's any question that is going around in your mind that you would like to ask at this point in the opening, where what exactly should be written in planners and what exactly are you writing in planners, then please do so now. Ronald?
Yes, hello, thank you. So I've been having difficulties when differentiating between learning content and the skills. So I kind of getting mixed up many times. So I need to clarification on that.
Great. And Ronald, may I ask which subjects do you teach?
I teach design, MYP.
Great. I have exactly the thing that you can take back with you for them.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for bringing that question. It's an amazing question to touch upon.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I do not see anybody else with their hand raised. So this means that we can go a little forward. So we're going to now look at this, that in a unit planner, what would you define as success? What would you say that this is successful? How is it that you as a group look at a planner and you feel, oh, this is something which is like, which is amazing. This has made my planner really great for the students, right? So what we're going to do is, we're going to start in two different ways. In your mind first, I want you to look at the picture which is in front of you from left to right. Sometimes teachers start with the idea that I want to create an amazing unit for my students. I want that this unit is something that they remember, right? So many times teachers start from the left-hand side, that what is a successful unit like, and they try to work towards the right-hand side, which is how do teachers plan. Many times in schools, teachers are put on the deep end. This means they are starting from the right-hand side, where they are in the planning part. How do teachers plan? And through the planning, they want to create a unit which goes towards the left such that it is successful. So take a minute, pause, and then let's talk to one another. What is the way that unit planning happens in your school? And how is it that these three parts interact?
I think what we do is we try and do backward planning, wherein we want to see what is the thing that we want our kids to learn at the end of, or know at the end of the unit. So we try to first plan the summative task and see what we want to do, and then do the backward planning from there. I think that helps most of the times.
Thanks so much, Hira. That's one way of doing it. Anyone else?
I would like to share, this is Apa. Once we start the unit with the provocation, we generally co-construct the learning engagements, even the unit planner with the students, as well as the formative assessments. So once we realize, okay, this is going in the right direction, the engagements are going in the right direction, we take it forward, even for the assessments. So sometimes we co-construct, and sometimes we escalate the students where we are looking them to go ahead with the planner so that it goes in the right direction. And definitely at the reflection stage, we write down our reflections, like where we went wrong and where or which areas need to revisit. So this is how we generally plan.
Thank you so much, Abba. Good to see you.
Hi, Gurpreet.
Hi.
Can you hear me? This is Babita from Pledge Harbor International School, Dhaka.
Hi.
I was in GMIS Bali. I've met you there. Okay, so my take on this is that first we begin, of course, assessment. I agree with Hiral. First, we will look at the assessment for learning. Based on that, we will take it forward. Like, we have to see where the learners are, at what stage. We need to bring in the differentiation. All that planning starts from there. And all the teachers in our school, we are following this process of assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning, right? So that's how we plan. And of course, we introduce the unit where the teachers have planned, but we do bring in changes because we bring in the agency. There are questions coming from students, some inquiries are happening. So there is some change in the planner that we have already set right at the beginning of our unit, right? So I don't know how much time I have, but one can just go on talking, but this is one of the ways that we really follow where the teacher collaboration is concerned. We have meetings, horizontal and vertical meetings, where we bring in the subject specialists to integrate their part in the unit for planning. So there's a lot of integration happening this time, Earlier, we used to integrate only about 1 or 2 subjects, but now we have almost everyone integrating Bangla, PE, art, music, So it is becoming quite interactive and interesting planners now on. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really like. So you're looking at assessments, you're looking at your learning goals, you're looking at what you need to achieve, and then you're planning from there. Is anybody following any other style of planning? Okay, so in general, it means that we have, Pankaj is saying that you're looking at the lesson. Like if you're designing the lesson, then you're actually engaging learners and you're seeing how the cycle goes from there. So you're looking at formative assessments and how the students are reflecting on it. So that's an interesting way to see how units are developing from there. This means that as teachers, your planning process revolves around two things. One is the student's need that you're keeping in mind. The second you're holding on to is what you want to teach to the students, right? So when I want to identify students' needs, I could be having a lot of diagnostic tests or formative tests, as you want to say. You'd be using that and saying, is this what I need to teach? Correct? And then you'd be saying, okay, what is it that I'm going to do to teach this? Correct? So two things. Now, where is the concept in all of this then? Because what you talked to me was content, or you might be talking about skills, right? So this is what I wanted to start with, that as teachers, when we really sit down to plan, and if you're thinking about it, we need to understand that we tend to gravitate towards content or skills, right? And if we as adults, after so much work in the IB, tend to do that, to make that content to concept jump, it is something that we are doing consciously. We are forcing ourselves to go through it. Then what exactly should we be doing that the student makes this jump or this connection between content to concept? So when we are designing, I'm going to now make you look at the same slide again. It's exactly the same slide, but now in your mind, you're going to be asking the question and you're going to be really looking at it in the unit planning process. So I'm on the right-hand side because I believe that the group is more focused on the right side approach. So you're moving from right to left. That's what is there. Now, in the unit planning process, if I'm saying that you are creating a concept-based curriculum, what do you think so needs to be done such that your thinking as an educator who's designing this is conceptual in nature? What strategies will you use such that you are designing conceptual engagements? Which would be better when you are making strategies or content which is conceptually leading for a student? I want to open this conversation because there are certain subjects that struggle making a conceptual unit plan. And I belong to such a subject, right? Because I believe it's very easy for an INS teacher or an individuals in society or a history teacher to talk about transfer, right? But when you talk to a mathematics teacher, a design teacher, a language and literature teacher, they tend to say, I want to teach multiplication, or I want to teach how to solve quadratic equations, because that's where they're coming from. So my question to you in the unit planning process is that when you're designing for planning conceptually, what do you really think needs to be done as an educator such that you are thinking from the conceptual part from day one when you start planning, right? So Liana, you were saying start by a concept attainment. That's great. So students explore and understand the concepts. Look at the general idea or the big picture. Lloyd, that's a fantastic solution to look at. Really good. What else can teachers do? Look at the global context. Yes, for me, because that's making a connection to the real world. Encourage analysis and connecting with the central idea. Absolutely. You will start by analyzing the prior understanding and picking up from there. Great.
I think I also find it very overwhelming when planning a unit planner, when we start, actually we've done the planning and we start actually taking forward in the class. I tend to get overwhelmed and, get into the whole thing so much and get so excited that sometimes you are here and then suddenly you are here. So, as a teacher, I get anxious and excited with the unit. So I think for me to, hold myself back and again pull myself to the place where I want to actually start and take the kids as a process, I think I want to learn that thing and consciously apply that.
Absolutely. And, here Eliana is also saying that, start with questions that are relevant to the concept. And I agree with you, Hiral, that when teachers start planning, they have no idea how the student is going to receive that concept, what is going to go on further. We're going to come back to this slide in a bit because I'm going to do a little bit of a direct instruction. And we are going to, start building on the right-hand side. That what exactly is it that we should do when we look at, when we look at the way a planner is presented to us. And because majority of you are IB educators, I think so I will try and focus a little bit on what is happening in the IB planners, what we lost when we took things from other, other people and how they've moved forward, right? So we're going to be now understanding that when these planners were given to us, the IB created the planners, we've got something which is very unique. I'm leaving the question now open for you. I'm sure that you have heard about Bloom's taxonomy. And I want to actually, the correct terminology is dimensions of knowledge, but I want you to actually think about when we talk about Bloom's taxonomy, we know that there was this huge change that happened in Bloom's taxonomy and educational research started talking about it. But I'm opening the door to saying that there was something uniquely different that happened when Bloom's taxonomy was reorganized. And that led to us adding something as the dimensions of knowledge through another research that came in. So as educators, are we aware that these two things are interplaying together in unit plans? And are we aware that when this, when this happens, we are actually consciously asked to plan for two things together and not just one? So take a minute. If you need to Google, you need to Google very quickly 4 dimensions of knowledge. What are the 4 dimensions of knowledge? And if you want to see the old and the new way in which Bloom's taxonomy is organized, then maybe you can Google that too. But the idea here is not to just know something, but to reflect on it. So don't worry if you don't know the 4 dimensions of knowledge. Would you like to take a wild guess? What do you think so could be the 4 dimensions of knowledge? Okay, let's make things easy. If I look at Bloom's taxonomy, on the left-hand side was what the original cognitive domains were. So Bloom said that we've got
Okay, I have muted Raj.
no worries. So Bloom's original work, which was actually shared by Anderson, and that was the basis of what started happening in education for us, was we started looking at these demands that were placed on the cognitive domain. Now you all might wonder, why is it important for us? I'm like, we're not using it. Where do you see Bloom's taxonomy? We're all IB educators. Hear ye, all your MYP learning outcomes or objectives and your MYP criteria, each one of them addresses one aspect or the other aspect of the cognitive domain. So when you come to the highest level in the MYP, which is level 7 and 8, you will realize they're always talking about either synthesis or evaluating something. That's why the command terms are there. So if you start picking up the command terms and matching them to this, lo and behold, the whole MYP criteria will start making sense to you. If you look at the PYP, the same thing happens. When you're designing your own rubrics, it's important to look at these cognitive domains. So the initial cognitive domain started with knowledge, and then they started moving towards the top, which was about synthesis and evaluation. When the revised cognitive domains were given as recent as in the late, in the 2000s, the early 2000s, when they came, the whole world started talking about just the bit on the top, which is, oh, there is a switch between synthesis and evaluation. And all of a sudden, the word here is creating. So they're not just looking at synthesis. Now they're saying creating is far more difficult than evaluating. And the word synthesis was replaced by creating. But there's a whole lot of changes that have happened here as well. So let's start from the lower rung. The first word that was given to us was knowledge. In the revised cognitive domain, the word knowledge was replaced by remembering. Now that's a big change. Remember this, right? Keep this in your mind, because that is something that we're going to be talking about. Did it mean that these educators, these researchers, they found out that knowledge was not important and what was important was just remembering facts? Is that the reason why the switch was made? When they talked about comprehension, they replaced comprehension with understanding. Now, those of you who do MYP, think about criterion A usually in the MYP. What is it called? Is it called knowing and understanding, or is it called knowledge and understanding?
Knowing and understanding.
And was it ever any point of time in the MYP history, was it ever called knowledge and understanding?
Yes, it was.
There was a time it was called. And why do you think so, that knowledge was changed from knowledge to knowing and understanding? What does knowing and understanding imply for educators?
Prior knowledge.
Prior knowledge, great. But why knowing and not knowledge? Schema, yes, Babita. Schema, absolutely true. But if I was an English teacher, sorry.
The law of readiness, ma'am, is my answer correct? The law of readiness, the mental age of the students also matters a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank
and
you.
as an English,
Knowledge sounds recall.
Yes, knowledge sounds recall, Jyoti, absolutely. In English language, if I put ing, what kind of words are formed with ing?
Verbs.
Love you.
Action words. Yeah.
Action words, absolutely. So what has happened here is that when we are talking about a simple change from what knowledge is, knowledge appears to be a noun, right? Whereas knowing appears to be a verb. So what IB was trying to do with that shift was to bring to the notice of educators that this is a verb. These are action words that we are looking at. Each one of them, the biggest change that happened was, if you see on the left-hand side, they changed towards the right-hand side into action verbs. If you see, application became applying, right? Hidden inside the change in the cognitive domain was the action bit. This means that teachers have to plan for an action that the child is doing. It is not something that the child is receiving, but it's an action that the child is doing. And therefore, this is your first big takeaway. Looking at your learning outcomes, looking at your learning objectives, these are two different things. If you're a PYP teacher, you're looking at learning outcomes, right? As an MYP teacher, we're looking at learning objectives. In the MYP, the learning objectives and the criteria are exactly the same. In our learning objectives, we are supposed to have action verbs, and these action verbs or words should be such that you should be planning engagements which help this happen, right? Which are making this happen. Now, the big question, remember, what happened to knowledge? We threw away knowledge and we kind of implied that you're okay if you kind of just remember. And then every MYP came in and it changed and said knowledge and understanding together as a learning objective. So what exactly is happening here? Let's go to the next step. If you're looking at Bloom's taxonomy, with this discussion that we've just happened, what are you going to take as your next steps when you go for designing now either your assessment task or even a small bit of your planner? Do you want to stare at the Bloom slide again?
Yeah, can we have the question again, Gurpreet?
So what is the insight that you are gaining after reflecting on the change that has happened in Bloom's taxonomy? So my question is a simple one. What are the insights about using Bloom's taxonomy now in your unit planning?
So it's basically the process that we have to observe.
Okay, that's nice. And
not really looking at the product, but focusing more on the process.
Correct. Absolutely, looking at the process. So the change that we were looking at was here. These are the different domains of cognitive, the cognitive domains that are there. This is what Bloom's taxonomy is talking about. And I'm actually sharing with you that this is what is embedded into our MYP learning objectives and criteria. So when you said that you start from assessments or the things that students need to know, what are the insights that you will now use, knowing that these are part of what the kids should do? What would happen? Great. I like that, Gayatri, you're saying it will move the students through. You can map the learning levels.
I think also for the teachers, it becomes so much easier where we exactly know what we are tapping at and what we are looking at. I think this has made the whole process much easier than before.
Great. Perfect. So now let's think. In my teaching and learning section, pick up any of the planners that you had made at any point of time. Had you consciously designed any activity which was targeted towards any of these bits? Do we consciously write this down in our teaching learning action part of the planner? Or do we think that this happens by default? Is it by default? So many of you are saying is that you write in detail. Some are saying no. You are mentioning, you might be writing. The first thing when we do unit planning, which is conceptual in nature, we need to remember that we need to start with these domains. You cannot have the transfer happening without the domains being addressed to, because the transfer starts happening in the higher end of the domain. Transfer doesn't happen in the lower end of the domain, but in the higher end. To reach the higher end, you need to build the lower end with the students. Okay, so our first insight now comes that we are going to be planning through. I'm going to take you to the next. When we're saying that knowledge was replaced by remembering, my question was, what happened to knowledge then? So looking at what happened to knowledge, I'm going to now take you to something which is very, very unique, but this is being shared in a number of books. If you have read on curriculum, the way curriculum is designed, the work that I normally refer to is Rothwell's and Anderson's work. Anderson's work talks about the relation between the cognitive domain and the knowledge dimensions. I think so that this should have been something that IB should have taken and shared with educators. But it was left open to educators to kind of, figure this out on their own. So in this session, I hope that it is a turning point for you. For the very first time, you will see things which are there, which are mentioned, but which are never utilized for planning. So I open the doors now for conversations among us as teams to look at when we are having a knowledge dimension and we talk about knowledge. And that is where many of you came from, right? That you know what exactly you want to be teaching your students. And then you say that I want to teach this and I'm going to be planning. I open conversations now with you to say, do you create a cognitive planner which talks about, on one side, the Bloom's taxonomy of the different dimensions of cognition, and on the other side, it talks about the knowledge dimension that you might be looking at. So if I'm talking about factual knowledge, where exactly is your unit on this continuum? Are you coming to the factual knowledge at different cognitive, for different cognitive dimensions, or are you just coming it from once and that's it? Because the way presently MYP unit plans are written, we tend to write just one factual question or 2 to 3 factual questions and say, this is it, we are done. So if you want, you can take a snapshot of this, you can take a screenshot of this, and so that you have it handy on your laptop or your device, because I'm going to stop sharing this and we're going to be talking about it. We're going to use a Google Jamboard to put a few things together for ourselves. Have you taken a screenshot? Okay, a thumbs up reaction would do, and I'm going to stop sharing. Great, I just see one reaction. I saw Abba with another thumbs up. I hope the others have been able to take this. So my question now here to you is, thanks Gurpreet. Thank you, Gayatri. Yeah. Good, Jyoti. Ronald, thanks. White Madhavi, thank you so much. Asma, Sangeeta, thank you so much. Nisha, thanks. So now my question to you is, thanks, Dr. Pankaj, Hero, anybody else who's not been able to take the screenshot? I'm sure one of the participants can put it in the chat. Mr. Rajkumar, thank you so much. So my question to you now is that when you have the cognitive domain in front of you and you have the knowledge dimensions in front of you, I'm opening the discussions now for, have we ever created unit plans by starting with this as our planning step, right? So, okay. Eliana, you are saying that you have used this. That's amazing. Would you like to share your experience with others?
Sure. Mainly, I took this in one of the workshops, learning to transfer. So, and I'm already a CBCI trainer. So what we usually do is we start with the factual knowledge, what the students need to understand. And we say that at the beginning of the unit, but what we try to tell teachers, every time you need to introduce students to a new thing, you have to keep on thinking, what is the prior knowledge? So the way we plan our own engagements is we start with our concepts, and then we start planning what are the connection between the concepts that we need students in order to reach. And then I start creating multiple questions that would address each generalization. So we start with, as if we're going through the factual, the conceptual, the metacognitive, the different levels of dimensions of knowledge, with each generalization that we're trying our students to reach. For example, I teach novels. I'm a language and literature teacher. Recently, I started with INDS as well for grade 6 students, year 1. So what I usually do is with the factual questions, we try to remember what are the basic things that our students, they need to understand. So we're asking them about the elements of a story, for example, or describe the setting that you have in a story. We're still in the factual, we're looking at the remembering and the understanding of it. But when we ask them to apply, for example, their understanding of setting on a new, for example, short story they haven't known before, in order to identify it, for example, or to create a setting, we're going through the application of it. And then when we look into the whole understanding of the concept, what is setting? So based on the different examples you have, what do I understand, for example, at the setting? Why do you think the author actually uses the setting in order to convey a theme of a story? We're looking at the conceptual level of it. Later on, for example, I'm going through it. And then when we have the procedural knowledge, usually when we go into the steps of the things that we have to do, we usually have it in science, for example, when they're creating their lab reports. For us, for example, when we're writing our own story, because it's a whole process that we're going through whenever we're writing. So we ask them, for example, to what extent are you able to apply your understanding of the concept setting in creating your own setting within the novel that aligns with other concepts. So we're looking at the concept of setting, and then we connect it to the other concepts that we need to have in order to write the whole story. The new thing that we're adding is the metacognitive. So usually we finish our assessment, our students, they write the narrative, and that's it, we're done. The idea is we need to, let's say, provoke students to think about their narrative. To what extent were you able to use your knowledge, for example, of setting and literary techniques in writing your own story? Was it successful? Was it not? So we're asking them to think about all the conceptual knowledge that they have, all the procedures that they actually followed. And was it successful or was it not? What did you do? Give evidence from it. And this will help them in order to, let's say, self-correct themselves later on. And we usually ask them at the end, let's use the rubric, evaluate how much you will get. You'll find out that by time, students are able to really self-evaluate because now they understand the elements within the rubric and they're able to know, yes, I was able to convey the setting, but I wasn't able to use a lot of techniques, for example, to higher the level of embedding the setting within. Or I didn't, for example, explore to a lot of extent why the setting, for example, provoked the characters or made me portray them in the way that we are. So this is merely one example how we can go from the factual to the conceptual, the procedure, the metacognitive level within your unit plan. Just the main idea, do not think about it as it's one thing. It's every single learning that students, they need to go to. Because every concept, there's a major understanding. We call them generalizations that students need to understand. And there's a connection between these different concepts. And the idea is we make students try to find that connection because this will help them to use Bloom's taxonomy because they're synthesizing the learning now. They're creating a whole new, for example, product that will reflect that understanding within. And this is merely, I'm trying to simplify it as much as possible for everyone, at least. Hopefully it was clear enough. I think you muted, Gurpreet.
Thank you so much. Very nice. I was giving a round of applause to you. That was really nice to hear it and to actually see what it means. I'm so blessed to have you in the group here because this is what you need to hear from other educators. And this is what this entire session is, that we are global educators coming together. And what Eliana has said with a very simple example is like, it's something as, as you're teaching in, let's say, in the primary school. I think so. We have any questions here? Eliana, would you be open to answering a few questions?
Definitely.
Does anybody have any questions here?
Great. No questions. I think Eliana has beautifully explained and given examples. But I was just thinking, all these knowledge areas, they run from remember to create in different dimensions. Like factual would remember and understand. It'll go under that. And conceptual will go under apply. Then this procedural also will be under apply. And when we analyze, I think procedural could go under analyze and evaluate, and metacognition would certainly will go under create, right? That is like, it's like driving the whole process of learning towards creating something. So by then the students, their higher order thinking skills are developed and they are able to create something on their own, like maybe a poster or something like that. So it's, all these four areas are, touched upon through the dimension at various levels. And of course, we can come back to conceptual or factual again. It's not that once you've done factual, you forget about it. maybe we need to come back and touch upon these areas. So I think it's going forth and backward with all these areas. Thank you.
Definitely. That's a good point that you actually bring here, that we actually tend to look at that when we're saying remembering, it could be like you're remembering facts. But is it possible that anytime students are creating their own facts?
I think
Yes,
Gurpreet
they
asked
do.
the,
Yes,
I
they
think
do.
Gurpreet asked the perfect question now. Can I clarify a bit?
Sure, please.
Okay. Usually for factual question, you can actually hit all. So you can start with remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and critiquing. Because sometimes we ask students to evaluate how certain media messages, for example, they give you certain facts about things. They're still evaluating, they're still creating, but I'm still hitting on the factual knowledge. I only start with the conceptual knowledge, the procedure, the metacognitive, when I'm looking from applying to creating. It's from the whole level. So applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating, they all go within the conceptual knowledge. Because what you need to think about is students, they need to understand the meaning of the concept. I look at different examples and students, they understand the meaning of that concept. But later on, they start applying it in different contexts. This is what we usually say, the level of the different levels of transfer that actually students and teachers, they go within. It might be something that is familiar, and then we move on academically familiar, and then we move on to academically unfamiliar, and then we go to a real life situation. This is why. So it's a whole area that we go through, and we try to provoke our students in order to reach the higher level. I'm an IB educator, and usually IB, they ask us to have the real life context. And teachers, they say, yes, we want our students to transfer. But the idea is we train our students to transfer. So we train them from something that is familiar within the classroom. And then we start moving. It's an unfamiliar situation. It can be a story that they need to analyze, but they haven't seen before. It's an unfamiliar situation, but within the academics that we're looking at. But when you take them, you move them to their own, let's say, uncomfort zone that they have. They need to move on to a real situation. They looked at the news, and yes, they can apply it. Now we will start with the innovation that our students, that yes, they're using these concepts, they're applying them in something new, they're creating something, and then they're evaluating. So there's a whole level of transfer that teachers are only looking, yes, we need them to transfer to real context, but the idea is they cannot move the students to that real life context, the innovative situation that we want them to, because it's a high level of application. So we need to train them before how we can actually work on something within the classroom. Yes, let's do it on a smaller scale. And then let me give you a text that you don't know before. Let's apply our learning on that, for example, context. It's familiar situation. Yes, we're transferring, but at least the students are now aware. How can I use that skill? They can evaluate it. They can use their own metacognitive. How can I actually improve myself? What did I use? I can evaluate my own learning that's going throughout. And then I start presenting students within different contexts that, yes, we'll move them a bit to the unfamiliar situation. I would suggest for everyone who's in the IB, just to give more insight, because I only got this when I started reading Learning to Transfer book. It's by Julie Stern and a lot of educators. I took multiple workshops with her, and this is when I started really understanding within the workshops and IB workshop leaders, they used to discuss, there's near transfer, there's far and far transfer. Okay, what does that mean? And usually it wasn't that clear until I learned there's a whole matrix of learning to transfer that, yes, students, they need to go through in order to reach towards the end. But at least start with the baby steps that Gurpreet said, as long as you're already aware that, yes, we have different levels of knowledge that we're working on, and we see the bigger image, how we want to incorporate within our unit, then we can start becoming more aware of the details. How many details do I need to have? How purposeful do I need to be within my unit planner? This is why. Hopefully it's clear.
Thank you so much, Ileana, because I couldn't have put it more beautifully than you have. And I really appreciate, because as I said, sometimes when we are sitting in the IB workshops, The workshop leader says something and we just take the bit that we want to take and we just go. And many times, like, I have a teacher from my school here, so I'm going to close my eyes and say this. I actually have had times when I said, did you read the guide? Because in the guide, what IB has very beautifully done is, and Gurpreet is laughing about it because she's from my school, but this is a fact. What has been done is that in the guide, in the criteria descriptors, in IB, it says students are dealing with familiar situations, and then you have students are dealing with unfamiliar situations. But nobody understands from where we got this, right? And we need to get this as educators, that there is this matrix of transfer that exists. Educational researchers are talking about it, that how does transfer really happen? And for students to move from content to concept, you need to guide them, scaffold their learning to transfer so that it happens. Only then can they come back to the metacognitive state of writing a reflection and not just saying, I planned this and I did it and it was great, but to critique it using the conceptual lens that you have taught them in the unit. That's what really evaluating is all about. And now we come back to the question that was there. If we are having subjects which are procedural in nature, like mathematics, language arts, right, design, these are subjects that tend to be more procedural in nature. How do you do your planning then? Because content here overlaps with concept. So if you read Lynn Erikson's work, you might say, is multiplication content or is it a concept? Right? And that is where another bend down the road starts happening. So pause and reflect, take the big chunk here now that Eliana has shared as an example, make a note for yourself that how would you learn to change the planning process? What are you going to do from the first step after this session? When you go back to your planners, would you take this matrix of the knowledge dimensions and the cognitive process dimensions? Would you see the interplay of this happening? Would you plan for this? Would you see how it plays out in your units and how it is a recursive process? It comes like back again. You're building on this. How you're going to be using this in planning? What are the changes that you're going to make? And would you consciously search for levels of transfer? Eliana, may I request you to write down the name of the book that you mentioned? I'm sure it'll help everybody. So reading that extra bit, really big suggestion as please do, because as Eliana said, like, when you start with the IB, when I used to think that I'm a great IB teacher and I make these fabulous unit plans, when I look at them now, I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking? It's always a process. We all go through this. It takes a little bit of time, but I'm sure it's going to help us. Now I'm going to put a Google Jamboard link here. And I just thought that it'll be interesting for us to, rather than lose what we are writing in our chat, we can actually write down our ideas and our thoughts. So may I request you go on to the Google Jamboard, pin down what are the next steps. Reflect. We are right now in the midpoint of our session. 1 hour has flown past. So we're in the midpoint and we're going to the next part of our session. Take a minute, write on the Google Jamboard, what would you do as your next steps after the discussion that we have just seen? If you're not familiar with Google Jamboard, you have a sticky note here. You can click on the sticky note and you can just type, leave it anywhere on the page. If you just want to leave a text, you can click on the text button and you can just leave a text box. If you think you would like to say it with pictures, you can just add an image from either your computer or from Google, and you can write on that image too. So anybody who's into memes and would like to use memes, feel free. If the first page gets full, you can click onto the top and you can go to the next sheet and you'll have the next frame open. So please feel free to use as many frames as you need as a group. Summarizing what we have just covered till now. So the insights that we can use and we can take them further should be that you should always try and match the higher order thinking skills with the facts. If you're just going to be doing that, it is not going to lead to deep learning that transfers, because that is just retention of factual knowledge. So try to avoid that pitfall. Factual knowledge just doesn't transfer, conceptual knowledge does. So this means try to move across the cognitive domains, right? Try and start addressing the different dimensions of knowledge when you are planning. Consciously, the interplay between the two, as Ileana shared, has to be done. The next is when you're looking at instructional strategies, try and remember that they should match the knowledge dimension type as well as the cognitive process as the learning goal. When we say that it's the learning goal, remember that using the command terms that IB has helps you to form those learning goals easily. So if your command term says evaluate, this means work backwards. Evaluate means that you're on the cognitive process of evaluation. Test where your children are in terms of knowing how to evaluate. If they don't know how to evaluate, build on the cognitive process by modeling, and then see on what dimension of knowledge you are at that point of time. Are they evaluating conceptually or are they just evaluating facts? Those are two different types of evaluation and both are valid. So depending on how you are going through it, remember to create this kind of a matrix always. It's a good tool to use. It's an excellent one for helping your teachers understand what they need to be building on and whether what they have planned is actually hitting on target. Is it meeting what they're saying it's going to meet? And in the end, remember that the assessments should align with both of these two together, your knowledge as well as your cognitive domain. So when we talk about creating assessments, and many of you did that, you were talking about how assessments should be authentic. Authentic assessment means that they are related to the life around or the world around the child. And that is where transfer seems to happen, be it in the child's own context or in the wider context. So from our first bit of the session, these are the insights that I just wanted to sum up. I'm sure that you would have more insights also. Keep on adding to them. And if there's anything else that you would like to talk about it, we can do that. If not, I would like to take you next to another bit that might be interesting. So I'll just give a minute. Any questions about all that we have discussed now?
Can you repeat the insights again, please?
Sure. I'll share the screen. Would you like to take a screenshot of that? So broadly speaking, these were the 4 insights that you can take. Just because we think that we are doing higher order thinking skills doesn't mean that it's going to deal with the kids learning how to transfer. That's not something that can happen, right? If you as teachers are designing learning engagements, remember to keep with you an entire matrix for the learning engagements, because every learning engagement could be highlighting a different aspect altogether. When you have done this, you should be able to see that students would be able to move through the different dimensions, and they would be able to look at the different dimensions as well as the cognitive processes as interrelated. Now, when you look at these insights, I also want you as people who are there with us and have heard it. It's easy for you to understand because you heard examples that Ileana shared, that how you take the students from one to the other. You did not see the boxes in the matrix as defining, compartments. You understood the whole picture. But a limitation of showing this kind of a matrix to teachers, when I say this kind of matrix, this kind of a box approach, what happens is teachers tend to compartmentalize. They might say, oh, factual knowledge is different from conceptual. This is different from this. There is no relation between the two because they're separated by lines. right? So just a word of caution. When you introduce this type of a model and you have understood it because you have had the discussion with people, you understood it because you've had a chance to clarify. If a model is given without talking, then there's a limitation of that. Sometimes it does not illuminate the relationship among the facts, the concepts, the procedure, and the metacognitive awareness. So remember, there is a link. That relationship is very strong. One is building the other, and there could be a back and forth movement that's happening all the time between the column on the left. That was our dimensions of knowledge. It does not give you much insight that what is procedural knowledge or what is factual knowledge or what is metacognitive knowledge, because it just says, and people can make their own definitions. So do try and share with your school or your teachers, if you want to take this method back, that what does each of these things mean? And the last one is that it separates everything into small, small boxes and doesn't tend to create a cohesive whole. So remember that model is a cohesive whole. There's an interplay between the different elements that exist. You cannot be assuming that just because it has been put in a tabular form, that there is no interconnection. It's just that it is an easy way to remember. It's an easy way to organize. That's the only thing that has been done there, right? So with this, is there any question on this model that I have shared with you? Because we are now going to be looking at our second part, which was Lynn Erikson's model and Lanning's model, and saying that how these two come together in learning engagements. So I'll stop sharing. If there is a quick question that you would like us to address. So we move on to the next bit. I'm sure that all of you have seen Len Erikson's work. 2012, when IB started doing a revamping of the MYP, we started hearing this for the first time. That what exactly is the ways in which we organize knowledge? Until that point of time, I had never even thought about that knowledge is organized in a particular manner. I came across the work of Dr. Lynn Erikson, and the first book that I read was Stirring the Head, Heart, and Soul. And this visual is from that book. So Lynn Erikson, somewhere in the 2000s, actually started sharing this work quite a bit. And it's not just Lynn Erikson. So you have Lanning, you have Lynn Erikson, you have others who have talked about it. But this model of knowledge is what forms the premise of an IB curriculum and the way it's designed. Now, there are certain differences in what IB took and what it left out. So when you try to understand IB planners, the thinking comes from two different sources: Understanding by Design by Grant and Wiggins, and the work of Dr. Lynn Erikson in a concept-based curriculum. Both of them have a lot of similarities, but there are differences. What IB did is took parts from both of them and put it together in their planners. So we are going to be learning about really from planning, which we did in the last bit. What does it mean when we are actually talking about transfer in the action section? So here, when you are analyzing Lynn Erikson's model, I'm sure that each one of you must have seen this somewhere or the other in some workshop. If you've attended an IB workshop, this is a very common diagram that is shared. Lynn Erikson says that knowledge is created by putting together facts, and these facts are organized under topics. These topics come together to support the understanding of concepts, and that the interplay of the concepts, the interrelationship of the concepts is summarized as a general principle. And that can lead a child to give a theory or theorize and say that this is what it could be in general. Now, Lynn Erikson's work, as an example, take a minute to have a look at this. Our biggest takeaways from here, when we look at this, are we as teachers and educators literally sitting down and creating generalizations? Or is it something that we find most difficult to create?
A kind reminder to our facilitator that the session has been 1 hour and 30 minutes. Yeah.
I still have 30 minutes.
It was a 1 hour session, Gurpreet. Well, it's okay. I guess our participants here enjoyed a very large benefit. Yeah, so yeah, you got to enjoy a 2 hours workshop instead of 1 hour. You'll be able to learn a lot from it. Thank you for our facilitator, Gurpreet, contributing so much.
Now it shows I actually, you see, I didn't kill you with PowerPoint presentations. If you see, I only prepared 20 slides because I really thought it was a 2 hour session. I'm so sorry, and then I think so it's the time conversions that I do in my head.
No, it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. As long as our participants are happy. Yeah.
Okay. But I think so that can we just continue this last bit because it's just
of course, yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay. You started 10 minutes late, Inen.
Yeah, true. And I'm always happy as long as the participants are happy. Yeah, it is actually we are gaining more from our presenter, you know.
Okay, I need to remember next time 1 hour. Okay, 1 hour. Right. Thank you so much. I'm like, oh my God, you guys are so sweet. You didn't even once write in the chat the time is up. Can we just give them one gold medal each across? Okay, so very quickly, without taking any more of your time here. I'm so sorry, guys. I really thought it was a 2 hour session. I don't know why I thought that. Okay, so I'm actually now going to take you further. Suppose I said that the ultimate goal that we had of a concept-based curriculum was to create the transfer, right? And we have discussed the transfer matrix in very general, that there are levels of transfer that we need to be aware of, right? We need to understand that how is it that you are as educators moving from one level to the other. So when I say that we are here at this section, many times our instructions in subjects are just focused on facts. How do you solve an equation which is here? What is happening? And then you talk about a topic and you say, oh yeah, the students have already done how to do linear equations and they know how to solve it. Very few teachers, just because you're in an IB setup, are forced to look at concepts and we say, okay, what are the related concepts? And then you have the teachers thumbing through the related concepts and saying maybe this and maybe this. But we are not sure which concept to pick up. I'm like, have you ever gone and said to your coordinator, I don't know which concept to take as a related concept? Has that happened? Do we have that confusion in our mind that what is the right concept to pick up? Because if that has happened, you are not alone. And it's okay, right? Because when you're looking at your topics, there are different things that we can talk about because we have talked about a set of facts. So understand that the concepts that you're picking up, they are supporting, they are the legs of a table. They are supporting the big principle or the generalization that you want to teach. And there could be a number of generalizations that you're forming. These generalizations are not your statement of inquiry. They are supporting lines of inquiry that are happening. And they're coming out from these related concepts that are coming out from your facts. So please understand that when you are designing your statements of inquiry, don't try and think that that big one statement will appear on its own. But think of it as a development process. Start from your facts if that is where you're comfortable. Okay? If you're comfortable for subjects which are more fact-oriented, let's say subjects which start with content itself as MYP coordinators, as teachers in a department, if your subject is heavy on content, then start with this model of looking at the facts that you're teaching, write it down somewhere. Pick up the big topic under which these facts are organized, and then say that this topic, which are the things that it relates to, and write those concepts. You should be following something like a concept attainment model, which says patterns. Am I teaching students patterns? And if you see a generalization or formula written here, then understand that that pattern led to the generalization, which is the formula. So you have two concepts, which is patterns and generalizations, that you can teach very easily. If you realize that majority of your topics consistently talk about patterns, generalizations, and so forth, this means that your general principle is that you want to teach students how they can identify the relationships that exist, or they can identify patterns, and these patterns can be generalized. So create a developmental process by which you are writing your generalizations, right? Please understand that there is a very minute difference between a key concept and a related concept. And the only minute difference is that related concepts flow out from my content or my facts directly. Key concepts are big concepts. They are macro concepts in the words of Lynn Erikson. So they are so big that they need to be supported. It's like a tabletop. It needs to be supported by smaller concepts, which are the legs of the table. And these legs of the table are bundles of your facts tied together with concepts, right? So when you are trying to identify a key concept, my strong suggestion to you as educators would be, just don't say I'm teaching change or I'm teaching systems, because they're huge. They're huge. You're not teaching everything about change. You're not teaching everything about systems. You're teaching a facet. You're just teaching a small bit about change. Could be about cause and effect. That what are the causes and effects, and because of it, change is happening. You could be teaching a small bit about systems, that how do different parts get interrelated and how do they work together or affect each other. So you're teaching a small bit about systems. Every time you have such a big macro concept in your planners, try and identify that what aspect of this big key concept have we done in this planner, and then slowly spiral out your curriculum around conceptual thinkings that are built on those key concepts. I'm going to say this once again. Spiral out your curriculum on the basis of the key concepts that you are teaching. Because in every unit that focuses on that key concept, you could be just teaching a small facet of that big key concept. Okay. Now, those subjects which are not content heavy. What if we are asking that transfer happens for concepts? So please remember two things that Lynn Erikson talks about in her work, which is shared in many of her books and talks, is that conceptual learning is such that it makes visible the process by which the knowledge of the facts are transferred, right? So when you're talking about simply knowing something, it is not transferred till the time you take it further. And that taking it further is making conceptual connections. The next one that we have is about conceptual transfer can only occur when the students, they take their insights about the relationships between these concepts into a new scenario. And in the IB, the new scenario are the transdisciplinary themes, or they are the global context that we have. So as Elena said, you are scaffolding the learning till the time the student is ready to make the connection with the real world. So you start with familiar, you take it to the unfamiliar, and then you take it to the real world. That is how you bridge the transfer between these three things. And this was the question that was asked by the design teacher. So if you're looking for planning for subjects like language and literature, language acquisition, design, arts, remember the structure of knowledge is now replaced by the structure of process, because many times, even in sciences, you have one aspect about remembering topics and content, but you have another aspect about the process of science, of what you're doing. So as teachers who are designing for those different subject groups, remember to look at skills and strategies and processes that you need. So when you're talking about the writer's process, when you're talking about how do you look at information, how do you organize this information, you should always begin with the skills and strategies and processes that you're going to be teaching. So rather than the other subjects, generalizing it for all subjects, you should be very clear that certain subjects come with processes. And from there, they flow out into the concepts and generalizations. So when we actually are designing our curriculum, you should be clear whether your subject is a process-based subject or your process is a content-based subject. And you need to make the connections that are there. I end my presentation with a slide which deals with strategies that you can use. I'm sure that some of my colleagues will be taking this up. I know that Ashika is doing the difference between unit planning and lesson planning. There are other such sessions coming up. But I leave you with a strategy, these three strategies which are common. The fourth strategy, I'm not so sure that IB educators have used it much, but I'm sure that the other three they have. So when you talk about unit webs, try creating unit webs, try unpacking generalizations, try creating unit maps for the school year. The last one, which talks about ordering generalizations. I visited a number of schools, but I still have to see a school that has tried and organized generalizations, such that we would see the inquiry process build over or in a curriculum. In a unit, yes, I do see that teachers are doing this, but in a curriculum, I still have to see the spiraling out of generalizations or one building on the other. I would suggest that we as educators make a change. We start moving from one to the other and see how we can do this, right?